Arrogance in the Hamptons is like the saltwater mist, it coats everything before you even notice it's there. Chloe Davenport believed that money could buy a different sun, a private sky, and the right to treat the rest of humanity as background scenery. It was mid-afternoon on a scorching Saturday in July. The manicured lawn of the Sterling estate stretched out like a flawless emerald carpet toward the Atlantic. Caterers in crisp white aprons hurried between white canopied pavilions, arranging baccarat crystal for the evening's engagement party. Julian Sterling, a billionaire whose hedge fund had swallowed up 3 competitor firms in the last quarter alone, was finalizing his tech monopoly dreams. And Chloe, his fiancée of 3 months, was presiding over the setup like a freshly crowned queen inspecting her infantry. "Not those hydrangeas," Chloe snapped, her voice cutting through the humid air like a ceramic blade. She adjusted her oversized Chanel sunglasses, her manicured finger pointing aggressively at a floral arrangement. "I ordered white, not off-white. This looks like a cheap motel wedding. Fix it." A few yards away, near the shadow of the pool house, Eleanor Vance was kneeling on the grass. She wore a faded blue denim shirt, a canvas utility apron stained with damp soil, and sensible orthopedic sneakers. To anyone passing by, Eleanor was simply the quiet, 62-year-old live-in maid Julian had hired 6 months ago to keep the sprawling estate running. She was the woman who changed the heavy Belgian linens, scrubbed the copper pots, and remained entirely invisible. Next to Eleanor sat her 2-year-old grandson, Leo. The boy's mother, Eleanor's daughter, was currently finishing a double shift at a local clinic in Queens, leaving Leo under Eleanor's quiet supervision for the afternoon. Leo was a remarkably calm child, sitting contentedly on a small plaid blanket, clutching a faded, deeply loved stuffed bear named Barnaby. Barnaby was missing one button eye, his brown fur worn smooth by years of toddler hugs. "Keep your voice down, sweet pea," Eleanor murmured softly, her fingers gently smoothing Leo's curls. "We'll go inside for your nap as soon as Nana finishes checking the patio hedges." Leo let out a soft giggling noise, tapping his little bear against a small plastic cup. Suddenly, the clicking of sharp stiletto heels approached. Chloe was marching toward the pool house, her face flushed with irritation. In her right hand, she carried a fine bone china cup filled with steaming English breakfast tea. Her 5-carat diamond ring caught the harsh afternoon sun, flashing blindingly. "Eleanor!" Chloe barked, stopping 2 feet away from the blanket. "Why is this child on the lawn? I thought I made it explicitly clear that the grounds were to be completely cleared of staff by 3 o'clock. Eleanor rose slowly, her back straight despite the heat. She wiped her hands on her apron, her face an unreadable mask of calm. "My apologies, Miss Davenport." Leo was just finishing his snack. "We were about to head to the staff quarters." Chloe's eyes dropped to the plaid blanket, then to the worn, one-eyed stuffed bear. A look of profound disgust crossed her face. "This looks utterly repulsive. Look at that disgusting rag. Julian's business partners from Wall Street are arriving in less than 2 hours, and I have the future heir to a Queens subway line playing in the dirt right where the governor is supposed to stand." "He's not in anyone's way, Miss Davenport," Eleanor said, her voice dropping into a lower, colder register that Chloe was too self-absorbed to notice. "He's just a baby." "He's a distraction," Chloe hissed. At that exact moment, Leo, sensing the tension, reached out his tiny hand. His chubby fingers accidentally brushed against the hem of Chloe's pristine, $4,000 white silk Oscar de la Renta sundress. A tiny speck of moisture from his plastic cup transferred onto the fabric, a spot no larger than a dime. Chloe gasped as if she had been struck. She recoiled, looking down at the microscopic damp spot on her silk skirt. "You little brat!" Chloe shrieked, her veneer of high society elegance instantly shattering to reveal a raw, ugly malice. Before Eleanor could react, Chloe leaned forward and violently snatched the stuffed bear out of Leo's hands. Leo immediately burst into a frightened, piercing cry. "Miss Davenport, please," Eleanor said, stepping forward, her hand extending instinctively. "Look at what his filthy hands did to my dress." Chloe yelled, her face contorted. This is custom silk. You people don't understand the value of anything in this house. You think because Julian pays you a generous wage, you own the place? In a display of sheer, unadulterated cruelty, Chloe tilted her hand. The boiling hot English breakfast tea poured out of her china cup in a dark, steaming stream, splashing directly onto the little brown stuffed bear. The hot liquid soaked through the fabric, scalding the toy and splattering onto the plaid blanket, barely missing Leo's tiny bare legs. Leo screamed louder, terrified by the sudden violence. But Chloe wasn't finished. She tossed the soaked, ruined bear onto the grass, raised her right foot, and brought her sharp Louboutin heel down directly onto the toy's face. She ground the heel into the dirt, crushing the remaining button eye into pieces. There, Chloe sneered, breathing heavily, looking down at the crying child with a sickening sense of triumph. Now it matches the rest of your trashy life. Pick up your garbage and get out of my sight. And if I see either of you outside the basement kitchen before tomorrow morning, I'll have Julian throw you both out on the highway without a reference. Eleanor did not cry out. She did not scream back. She knelt down, picked up her sobbing grandson, and held him tightly against her chest, shielding his eyes from the monster in white silk. With her free hand, Eleanor reached into the dirt and retrieved the hot, mud-caked, ruined stuffed bear. She stood up. Her eyes met Chloe's through the expensive Chanel sunglasses. There was no fear in Eleanor's eyes. There was only a vast, terrifying, glacial stillness. Is there something wrong with your ears, Eleanor? Chloe mocked, crossing her arms. I said move. We are leaving, Miss Davenport, Eleanor said. Her voice was completely steady. It had the weight of an iron vault closing. Enjoy your evening. As Eleanor walked away, carrying the weeping child and the broken toy, Julian Sterling stepped out onto the terrace. He was dressed in a tailored Tom Ford suit, checking his platinum Patek Philippe watch. Everything all right, darling? Julian called out, noticing his fiancée's agitated posture. Chloe immediately changed her demeanor, her voice turning into a sweet, fragile pout as she trotted over to him. Oh, Julian, it's just the help. Eleanor's grandchild almost ruined my dress. Honestly, I don't know where you find these people. They have absolutely no concept of boundaries or manners. Julian didn't even look toward the retreating figure of Eleanor. He casually waved a hand. She's just an old lady from upstate, Chloe. Don't waste your energy on her. If she bothers you, we'll just replace her next week. The agency has dozens of them. Come inside, the CEO of Vanguard just pulled into the driveway. Exactly, Chloe smiled, wrapping her arm through his, completely forgetting the incident. They're completely replaceable. Inside the cramped, sweltering staff bathroom in the basement of the mansion, Eleanor washed the mud and tea out of the little stuffed bear. She used a clean white towel to gently pat it dry. Leo had finally fallen asleep in the small cot in the corner, his eyelashes still wet with tears. Eleanor placed the damp bear on the table. She pulled a small, outdated flip phone from the deep pocket of her canvas apron. It was a secure, encrypted device she used only once every few months. She dialed a number she knew by heart. The call was answered on the first ring. A man's voice, crisp, professional, and dripping with absolute deference, spoke from the other end. Good afternoon, Madam Vance. We didn't expect your call until the autumn audit. Change of plans, Thomas, Eleanor said. Her voice no longer carried the submissive cadence of a long-suffering housemaid. It was the voice of a woman who held the debt of half the men on Wall Street. I need a full diagnostic on Sterling Capital Holdings. There was a brief pause on the line, followed by the rapid clicking of a keyboard. Julian Sterling's firm. Yes, madam. Our trust currently holds approximately 42% of their institutional debt through our offshore shell companies. He is currently seeking an expansion loan of $300 million to finalize a tech acquisition. Who is the lead underwriter for that loan? Eleanor asked, her eyes fixed on the crushed button eye of the toy bear. Vanguard and Apex Trust, madam. both of which are managed by your family's primary portfolio. Eleanor let out a short, cold breath. Good. Tell the board that the expansion loan is on hold. In fact, initiate a risk assessment review on all of Sterling's existing lines of credit. Let's see how sturdy his foundation is when the wind changes. Consider it done, Madam Vance. Shall we notify Mr. Sterling's office of the reason? No, Eleanor whispered, her thumb gently brushing the ruined fabric of the bear. Let him think it's just market volatility for now. And Thomas? Yes, madam. Find out everything there is to know about a young woman named Chloe Davenport. Her family background, her debts, her credit history, and every single boutique she frequents in Manhattan. I want to know exactly how much her arrogance costs. I will have the complete dossier on your secure tablet by 8 o'clock tonight. Thank you, Thomas. Eleanor closed the phone. She sat down in the quiet basement, listening to the muffled thumping of bass music from the upper floors. The engagement party had begun. Above her, diamonds were flashing, champagne was flowing, and Chloe Davenport was laughing, believing she was standing on top of the world. Below them, in the dark, the real architect of the world was just getting started. By Tuesday morning, the Hamptons hangover had set in, and the true currency of the elite information and access began to fluctuate. Chloe Davenport sat in the sunlit breakfast nook of her Manhattan penthouse, wrapped in a silk robe that cost more than a teacher's monthly mortgage. Her iPad was open to a spreadsheet of the guest list for the upcoming Met Gala after-party, but she wasn't looking at it. Instead, she was staring at her iPhone, her lips pressed into a thin, tight line. What do you mean, wait list? Chloe hissed into her AirPods, her voice echoing off the Italian marble countertops. I've been on the allocation list for the Black Birkin 30 since January. Monsieur Jean-Luc personally assured me it would arrive before the autumn gala. On the other end of the line, the manager of the Hermès boutique on Madison Avenue sounded entirely polite, entirely professional, and entirely unyielding. I deeply apologize, Miss Davenport. But our corporate compliance office in Paris just initiated a routine audit of our VIP allocation profiles. It appears your account profile is currently classified as secondary dependent under Mr. Sterling's primary corporate account. Until his firm's updated liquidity verification is processed, all unfulfilled luxury allocations are temporarily suspended. This is ridiculous. Chloe slammed her porcelain coffee cup down. Do you know who my fiancé is? He just bought a yacht. We are well aware of Mr. Sterling's success, Miss Davenport, the manager replied, his voice dripping with that specific brand of French disdain reserved for the newly rich. However, the system is automated. Have a wonderful day. The line went dead. Chloe threw her phone onto the marble island. Arrogant, overpaid clerks, she muttered, her perfectly sculpted eyebrows knitting together in rage. She didn't know that 3 miles away, in a wood-paneled office overlooking Central Park, Thomas Eleanor Vance's chief trustee was looking at a screen. He had just clicked a button that flagged Julian Sterling's corporate credit lines as under review for high-risk leverage. In the tightly woven ecosystem of ultra-luxury retail, a credit flag at a major Swiss bank was like a scent of blood in a shark tank. The boutiques didn't cancel you, they just quietly ran out of stock. Meanwhile, back at the Long Island estate, the morning routine continued with a deceptive, glacial calm. Eleanor was in the kitchen, wearing her faded blue apron, carefully preparing Julian's morning routine: 3 poached eggs, exactly 2 slices of artisanal sourdough toasted to a light golden brown, and a cup of black Kona coffee. Julian marched into the kitchen, his tie half undone, looking uncharacteristically disheveled. He was staring at his BlackBerry, his thumb flying across the keyboard. Eleanor, Julian barked without looking up. Did the mail courier drop off the certified prospectus from Apex Trust yesterday afternoon? No, Mr. Sterling, Eleanor said smoothly, her voice a perfect imitation of a submissive, dull-witted domestic worker. Only the utility bills and the town's zoning notices. Julian swore under his breath. Damn it. They were supposed to release the first tranche of the tech acquisition funds by yesterday at midnight. The underwriters are being unusually bureaucratic. Perhaps they are simply ensuring everything is correct, sir, Eleanor offered, her face a mask of polite innocence as she placed the plate of poached eggs in front of him. They're wasting my time, Julian growled. He took a bite of the egg, then froze. He chewed slowly, his brow furrowing. He looked down at the plate, then up at Eleanor. What is this? Poached eggs, sir. Just as you liked them. Julian swallowed, looking insulted. This is a standard grade A supermarket egg, Eleanor. Where are the organic, pasture-raised Araucana eggs from the local farm cooperative I pay $400 a month to subscribe to? Eleanor blinked twice, her expression completely vacant. Oh, dear. I am so sorry, Mr. Sterling. The delivery truck from the cooperative didn't arrive this morning. When I called them, the clerk said our delivery route had been reassigned due to an administrative scheduling optimization by their parent logistics company. I had to walk down to the local corner bodega to buy these. Julian's jaw tightened. A bodega. You fed me bodega eggs. To a man who built his entire personality on being a curated connoisseur of life, eating an egg from a regular grocery store was practically an act of violence. Cancel the cooperative subscription. Find another one. Of course, sir, Eleanor said, turning back to the sink to hide the faint, sharp smile spreading across her lips. The parent logistics company of that organic farm cooperative happened to be a subsidiary of Vance Global Logistics. It was amazing how a single email about route restructuring could redirect a billionaire's organic breakfast directly into a community food bank in the South Bronx. The phone on the counter rang. Julian snatched it up. Sterling here. Julian. Chloe's voice shrieked through the speaker, so loud that Eleanor could hear it from 5 feet away. Something is wrong with the American Express Centurion car. I'm at the Bergdorf Goodman Shoe Salon, and the cashier just told me the transaction requires verbal authorization from the primary account holder's risk management officer. It's humiliating. There are 3 people from my tennis club standing right behind me. Julian rubbed his temples, his ego bruised by the public scene. Chloe, calm down. It's probably just a glitch with the new security servers. I told you, the firm is undergoing a standard mid-year audit for the acquisition. Just use your personal visa. My personal visa only has a $20,000 limit, Julian. I'm trying to buy the limited edition satin pumps for the dinner party tomorrow. I can't pay for high fashion with a card meant for a flight attendant. Then leave the shoes and come home. Julian snapped, his patience evaporating. I have a $3 billion deal hanging by a thread because some desk jockey at Apex Trust hasn't signed off on the risk waiver, and they're screaming about pumps. He slammed the phone down, leaving the bodega eggs half-eaten. He grabbed his briefcase and stormed out of the house, the heavy oak doors rattling in his wake. Eleanor walked over to the table. She picked up the plate of rejected food. She looked out the window, watching Julian's silver Maybach tear down the driveway, kicking up gravel against the manicured hedges. Her phone vibrated in her apron pocket. It was a text message from Thomas. 星号dossier complete. Chloe Davenport. Real name, Chloe Higgins. Born in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Father, retired mechanic. Mother, former dental receptionist. Current debts, $94,000 across 4 commercial credit cards, disguised through a shell LLC registered in Delaware. Her engagement ring insurance premium is currently 30 days past due. 星号. Eleanor deleted the text. She walked back into the kitchen, picked up her landline, and called the estate's head gardener, an elderly Portuguese man named Mateo who had worked the grounds for 30 years. Mateo, good morning, Eleanor said in her true, authoritative tone. The weather forecast says we have a significant coastal storm system moving in tomorrow evening, just around 7 o'clock. The forecast says clear skies, Madam Vance, Mateo replied, sounding confused. The forecast is wrong, Mateo, Eleanor murmured softly. By tomorrow evening, the automated irrigation system for the main courtyard will experience a digital malfunction. It will trigger the high-pressure turf rotators at exactly 8 o'clock, right when Mr. Sterling's private dinner guests are arriving on the terrace. Do you understand? There was a brief pause on the other end. Matteo had known Eleanor's family for decades. He knew exactly who paid his pension. I understand perfectly, madam. A digital malfunction. The high-pressure rotators are very unpredictable during high humidity. Excellent. Thank you, Matteo. Eleanor hung up. She looked down at her small grandson, Leo, who was sitting on the kitchen floor, happily playing with a brand-new, identical brown stuffed bear that Thomas had delivered via courier at dawn. Leo hugged the new bear close, entirely unaware of the financial tectonic plates shifting around him. You see, Leo, Eleanor whispered, kneeling down to kiss his forehead. In this country, people like Miss Davenport think they can build a fortress out of glass and credit. But they forget one simple thing. She stood up, her eyes cold as flint. Glass breaks. And credit always comes due. The Wednesday evening private dinner at the Sterling estate was supposed to be Chloe Davenport's social coronation. Julian had invited 6 of the most influential venture capitalists on the East Coast, along with their formidable, old-money wives, the kind of women who decided which charities mattered and which newcomers were permanently blacklisted. Chloe stood before the triple-pane mirror in the master suite, smoothing down a breathtaking emerald gown. Her hair was pulled back into a flawless, severe chignon. Where is Eleanor? Chloe demanded as Julian walked in, adjusting his bow tie. The catering staff needs to know where the vintage crystal is, and that old woman is nowhere to be found. Honestly, Julian, her incompetence is becoming a hazard. She's in the kitchen where she belongs, Julian muttered, his eyes glued to his phone. He looked pale. His flagship fund had opened down 4% that morning, and the underwriters at Apex Trust were still completely silent. Just focus on the guests, Chloe. Tonight needs to be flawless. If the Vanguard Group doesn't see stability here, they'll pull out of the acquisition before Friday. Relax, darling, Chloe purred, painting her lips a dark, aggressive crimson. I've handled everything. By midnight, they'll be begging to invest. By 8 o'clock, the terrace was bathed in the warm, golden glow of custom fairy lights. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and Cuban cigar smoke. The guests, including Lady Penelope Vance Crosby, Eleanor's distant cousin by marriage, though nobody in that room knew it, were sipping champagne, discussing the volatility of the European markets. Chloe glided into the center of the crowd, her diamond ring catching every beam of light. Penelope, darling, Chloe gushed, approaching the grand dame of the Hamptons social circuit. I was just saying how much the charity board needs fresh blood this season. Julian and I were thinking of hosting the autumn gala right here on the lawn. Lady Penelope turned slowly, lowering her vintage tortoiseshell spectacles. She looked at Chloe with the chilling neutrality of an apex predator inspecting a strange insect. Are you? How ambitious, Miss Davenport, was it? Yes, of course, Chloe laughed, a little too loud, a little too desperate. We just feel it's our responsibility to give back to the... Before she could finish her sentence, a sharp, mechanical 星号 click 星号 echoed across the stone terrace. It was followed by a sudden, violent 星号 hiss 星号. From the edges of the manicured lawn, the high-pressure industrial turf rotators, the automated irrigation system that Matteo had reprogrammed, sprang to life with the force of fire hoses. But they weren't spraying fine mist. Due to a sudden change in line pressure, the nozzles rotated directly toward the stone terrace, unleashing a torrential, mud-tinged deluge of recycled well water straight onto the guests. A collective, high society shriek pierced the evening air. What on earth? Lady Penelope gasped as a jet of dirty water blasted her custom Chanel tweed jacket. Julian! Turn it off! Chloe screamed, her emerald silk dress instantly soaking through, turning a muddy, translucent green that clung to her in the most unflattering way. Her perfect chignon collapsed, wet strands of hair slapping against her face like dead seaweed. The chaos lasted for 2 agonizing minutes before the system finally shut down, leaving the wealthiest people in the zip code dripping wet, smelling faintly of sulfur and organic fertilizer, standing on a slick, muddy terrace. I am so deeply sorry. Chloe frantically grabbed a stack of napkins from a nearby table, rushing to Lady Penelope. It's the help. The maid must have messed with the timer. I will have her fired and ruined by tomorrow morning, I swear to you. Don't touch me, young woman, Lady Penelope snapped, brushing Chloe's wet napkins away with pure disgust. Your household is utterly feral. Julian, this is an absolute embarrassment. Julian's face went from pale to a dangerous, mottled purple. Eleanor, he roared, turning toward the French doors. Get out here right now. The doors opened. Eleanor walked out onto the terrace. She was completely dry, wearing her pristine, freshly starched apron. She carried a silver tray with fresh, dry linen towels. Her expression was the epitome of horrified concern. Oh dear, Mr. Sterling, Eleanor said, her voice dripping with soft, maternal panic. The main valve suffered a digital override. I tried to shut it off from the basement, but the server was locked. You stupid, useless old cow. Chloe lost all control, stepping forward, her wet heels squelching in her ruined Louboutins. She raised a hand, pointing a trembling, manicured finger at Eleanor's face. You did this on purpose. You've been sabotaging me all week. You're fired. Do you hear me? Pack your trash and your brat and get out of this house before I call the police for property damage. The guests froze. Even in their ruined state, the old money elites looked at Chloe's screeching outburst with profound distaste. True aristocracy never raised its voice. Chloe looked like a street brawler in a soaked dress. Eleanor didn't flinch. She simply looked at Julian. Is this your wish as well, Mr. Sterling? Julian, desperate to salvage his dignity in front of his investors, glared at Eleanor. Yes. You're done here, Eleanor. Collect your check from my assistant tomorrow. Get out. Very well, Eleanor said softly. She placed the silver tray of dry towels on a table. She didn't look angry. In fact, she looked like a judge who had just finished reading a verdict. I shall vacate the premises immediately. As Eleanor turned to leave, Julian's phone began to vibrate violently in his pocket. Then his assistant's phone rang. Then the phones of 3 venture capitalists on the terrace went off simultaneously. Julian pulled out his device. It was an urgent email from the executive board of Apex Trust. He opened it. His breath caught in his throat. 幸好, dear Mr. Sterling. Due to an immediate structural risk assessment review initiated by our primary trust overseer, Apex Trust has officially revoked its underwriting commitment for your $300 million tech acquisition. Furthermore, pursuant to Section 9 of our liquidity agreement, all current lines of credit extended to Sterling Capital Holdings are frozen pending a full forensic audit of your firm's leveraged debt. 幸好. No, Julian whispered, the color completely draining from his lips. No, no, no. This is a mistake. He looked up, his eyes wild with panic, just in time to see the CEO of Vanguard reading a similar notification on his own screen. The CEO looked at Julian, his expression turning cold as ice. Julian, the CEO said, his voice dropping into a lethal, quiet register. My compliance team just informed me that your firm's primary debt has been bought out by a private holding company called Vance Trust. And they are calling in the notes. Effective immediately. Vance Trust. Julian stammered, his knees shaking. I don't even know who they are. I've never met them. From the edge of the terrace, Lady Penelope Vance Crosby stopped drying her jacket. She looked at Julian with a sudden, dark realization, and then her gaze drifted toward the kitchen doors where Eleanor Vance had just walked through. Chloe, entirely oblivious to the financial execution happening right next to her, was still wiping mud off her arms, muttering insults. Good riddance to that old bitch, she hissed. Julian, call the police. Make sure she doesn't steal anything on her way out. Julian turned to his fiancée, his eyes wide, bloodshot, and filled with a sudden, terrifying realization of absolute ruin. He looked at her wet, ruined emerald dress, her smudged makeup, her hollow, grasping arrogance. He didn't say a word. He simply dropped his phone onto the wet stone, where it cracked right across the screen. By Thursday afternoon, the Hamptons estate felt less like a billionaire's playground and more like an executive morgue. The staff had quietly vanished, the private chefs, the second-floor maids, even the drivers. When a billionaire's primary credit lines are frozen by an institutional giant like Vance Trust, word travels through the domestic agencies faster than a New York subway train. Julian Sterling sat in his study, the air thick with the smell of stale scotch and cheap cigars. The mahogany desk was buried under mountains of red-stamped foreclosure warnings and margin calls. "They won't take my calls, Chloe," Julian screamed, slamming his glass down, spilling amber liquid over a stack of balance sheets. "Vanguard, Goldman, Apex, they've completely ghosted me. My assistant quit via text an hour ago. Someone is squeezing the air out of my lungs, and I don't even know whose hand is on my throat." Chloe stood near the window, clutching a white leather handbag like a shield. Without the professional makeup and the daily hair appointments, her face looked drawn, her cheekbones sharp and desperate. She was wearing a casual linen jumpsuit, but her fingers were frantically scrolling through her personal banking app. "Julian, you need to fix this," Chloe whispered, her voice trembling with an ugly, panicked edge. "My American Express card is completely dead. I went to the pharmacy down the street to buy my prescription, and the machine flagged it as a restricted account. The cashier looked at me like I was a shoplifter." "Your card." Julian let out a dark, manic laugh. "You're worried about your shopping allowance? Chloe, the bank is preparing to seize the Maybach by tomorrow morning. They're reviewing the deed to this very house. If I can't find out who controls Vance Trust and beg them for a restructuring meeting, we're going to be sleeping in a Manhattan studio by the end of the month." "A studio?" Chloe's eyes widened in sheer horror. The ghost of Scranton, Pennsylvania, the cheap linoleum floors, the smell of her father's greasy overalls, the damp winter air leaking through rusted window frames flashed before her eyes like a nightmare. "No. No way. I didn't spend 3 years climbing out of that hole to go back. Call your connections. What about Lady Penelope? She has old money. She knows everyone." "Lady Penelope blocked my number 3 minutes after the dinner party," Julian said, his head dropping into his hands. "She told her assistant to inform me that the Sterling name is now socially radioactive. We are entirely on our own." Chloe backed out of the study, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She needed a drink. She needed to think. She walked down the grand spiral staircase, her heels echoing through the empty, silent house. The lack of servants made the massive mansion feel hollow, like a gilded cage built for 2 prisoners. She entered the kitchen to find a bottle of wine, but stopped dead in her tracks. Sitting at the heavy oak island, calmly reading the Xinhao Wall Street Journal Xinhao while sipping a cup of perfectly brewed Earl Grey tea, was Eleanor Vance. She was no longer wearing her denim shirt or canvas apron. Instead, she wore a beautifully tailored, charcoal gray cashmere sweater and a pair of elegant pearl earrings. Her posture was regal, completely devoid of the deferential slouch she had worn for 6 months. Next to her, Leo was happily coloring in a book, completely safe and content. "What the hell are you doing here?" Chloe shrieked, her voice echoing off the copper pots. "I fired you. I told you to get your trash out of this house." Eleanor didn't look up from her newspaper. She turned a page with a crisp, deliberate Xinhao snap. "Xinhao. The lease on this property contains a standard tenant-landlord covenant, Miss Davenport. Until the foreclosure paperwork is officially served by the primary lien holder, which happens to be my trust, the domestic staff housing annex remains under my legal jurisdiction. I am simply enjoying my afternoon." "Your trust?" Chloe laughed hysterically, stepping into the kitchen, her knuckles white as she gripped the counter. "You're a delusional old woman. You scrub toilets for a living. You think because Julian's company is having a glitch, you suddenly own the place? You're pathetic. Eleanor slowly lowered the newspaper. She looked at Chloe with an expression of profound, crushing pity. Chloe, Eleanor said softly, using her name without a title for the very first time. You spent so much time hiding your past in Scranton that you forgot how to recognize real power. Real power doesn't scream. It doesn't wear 5-carat diamonds to a backyard barbecue to prove it exists. Real power sits quietly and decides whether people like you get to sleep indoors. You don't know anything about me. Chloe screamed, her face contorting with rage. I know everything about you, Chloe Higgins, Eleanor murmured, her voice smooth and chillingly steady. I know about the $94,000 in credit card debt you hid through a dummy corporation. I know your father's garage is currently heavily mortgaged. And I know that the insurance policy on that engagement ring you love so much was cancelled on Monday due to non-payment. Chloe's heart stopped. The room seemed to tilt. How do you know that? Because I own the bank that holds your debt, Eleanor said, rising slowly from her chair. She stood at her full height, her eyes locking onto Chloe's terrified face. And I own the underwriting firm that just crushed your fiancé's life's work. When you took my grandson's toy, threw it into the mud, and crushed it under your heel, you didn't just insult a maid. You insulted the Vance family. Chloe stumbled backward, her heel catching on the lip of the kitchen rug. She gripped the edge of the refrigerator, her breathing shallow. You're the Vance? The Vance Trust. My grandfather built the foundation of the very banks Julian begs for money, Eleanor said, her voice dropping to a whisper that sounded like a falling guillotine. I spend 6 months every year living simply, working in different communities, to remind myself of what real humanity looks like. I wanted to see if Julian Sterling was worth our trust's investment. He almost passed the test. But then he brought you into this house. Before Chloe could speak, the kitchen doors flew open. Julian ran in, his face covered in sweat, holding his phone. He didn't even notice Eleanor's expensive clothes or her changed demeanor. Chloe. I just got a text from an anonymous source at Apex. Julian gasped, his chest heaving. They said the principal trustee of Vance Trust is currently on the property. Right here in the Hamptons. They said she's been here for months. Julian stopped, his eyes finally landing on Eleanor. He blinked, looking at her cashmere sweater, her pearl earrings, and the absolute aura of authority radiating from her. He looked at Chloe, who was trembling, tears of pure terror leaking through her smudged eyeliner. Julian, Chloe whispered, her voice breaking entirely as she pointed a shaking hand at the woman who used to wash their dishes. It's her. She owns us. Julian's phone slipped from his fingers, crashing onto the hardwood floor for the second time that week. The silence in the kitchen was total, heavy, and absolutely lethal. The silence in the kitchen did not just linger, it suffocated. Julian Sterling stood paralyzed, his eyes darting from Eleanor's charcoal cashmere sweater to the unreadable, glacial calm in her eyes. The high-finance predator of Wall Street looked, in that moment, like a schoolboy caught stealing from the collection plate. Madame Vance. Julian's voice cracked, the words scraping out of his throat like sandpaper. He took a hesitant, trembling step forward, his hands automatically rising in a gesture of pure supplication. I had no idea. The agency, they never told us. If I had known your true family lineage, I would have never. If you had known my lineage, Julian, you would have treated me with the same sycophantic deference you showed to every executive with a Swiss bank account, Eleanor interrupted. Her voice wasn't loud, but it had the density of a marble column. But you didn't know. And because you thought I was small, because you thought my grandson was insignificant, you allowed your household to show its true teeth. It was a misunderstanding. Julian pleaded, turning wildly to point a finger at his fiancée. It was Chloe. She's the one who lost her temper. She told me the child was in the way. I was entirely focused on the acquisition, I swear to you. I have spent 10 years building sterling capital. You cannot let a single household incident liquidate my entire life's work." Chloe stood frozen against the stainless steel refrigerator, her breath rattling in her chest. Hearing Julian throw her to the wolves without a second thought was like a physical blow. The man who had promised her a lifetime of private jets and Hampton summers was now discarding her like a piece of contaminated meat. "Julian," Chloe whispered, her voice cracking, her Scranton accent slipping through her carefully practiced Manhattan cadence. "You told me she was completely replaceable. You told me to ignore her." "Shut up, Chloe," Julian snarled, his face contorted with a mixture of terror and unbridled rage. "You ruined this. You and your pathetic, fragile ego. You came into my house, acting like a queen, treating the most powerful woman on the East Coast like a dog in the dirt because you wanted to feel big. You are an anchor dragging me into the ocean." Eleanor watched the two of them turn on each other, her expression entirely detached. It was the exact outcome of the Xinhao relationship poisoning Xinhao and Xinhao desire exposure, Xinhao tools she had set in motion. When the golden scaffolding of wealth is stripped away, parasitic relationships do not dissolve gracefully, 他们会互相生吞活剥. "That's enough," Eleanor said softly. Both of them silenced instantly, looking at her as if waiting for a sentencing. "Julian, your firm's debt has already been restructured," Eleanor continued, walking calmly over to Leo, who had finished coloring and was now holding his new stuffed bear. "By 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, Vance Trust will execute the conversion clause. We will assume 70% equity in sterling capital. You will remain on the board as a minority advisor mostly because your name is still useful for navigating the regulatory red tape in Washington, but you no longer control the capital. Your private car leases, your corporate travel accounts, and your access to the Hamptons estate are officially terminated as of midnight." Julian collapsed into one of the kitchen chairs, his tailored Tom Ford suit suddenly looking 3 sizes too big for his shrunken frame. His lips moved, but no sound came out. The king of Long Island had been reduced to an employee in his own empire. Eleanor then turned her gaze to Chloe. Chloe shrunk back, her knuckles white as she gripped her Chanel handbag. Are you going to sue me?" she whimpered, her tears finally smudging her expensive mascara into dark, ugly streaks down her face. "Are you going to have me arrested?" "Sue you?" Eleanor let out a short, soft laugh that carried no humor. "No, Chloe. I don't use lawyers to fight people who cannot afford their retainers. That would be an insult to the legal profession. Your punishment is much more organic." Eleanor took a step closer, looking down at Chloe's ruined, muddy Louboutins. "The Delaware shell company you used to hide your personal credit liabilities has been flagged for a secondary financial audit by the underwriting bank. By tomorrow, your creditors will call in the $94,000 you owe. And since Julian no longer has an institutional credit line to bail you out, I suspect you will be spending your weekend talking to a bankruptcy trustee rather than the Met Gala committee." Chloe's purse dropped from her fingers, hitting the floor with a heavy, dull thud. Her social mask was gone. The minion, Chloe Davenport, was dead. There was only Chloe Higgins from Scranton, looking at a debt she could never repay in 3 lifetimes. "You wanted to teach my grandson a lesson about boundaries and status, Chloe," Eleanor murmured, her voice falling into that deep, late-night podcast host register, calm, resonant, and absolute. "Consider this your lesson. In the real world, the people who actually build the stage do not care about the actors who scream loudest on it. Now, if you'll excuse me, my grandson has an appointment at a private clinic in the city to ensure his legs weren't scalded by your tea." Eleanor didn't wait for a response. She gently lifted Leo into her arms, tucked his new brown bear securely under his little chin, and walked out of the kitchen. Outside the grand front entrance of the mansion, a sleek, unmarked black Lincoln Continental was waiting, its engine purring silently in the twilight. Thomas stood by the open passenger door, wearing a crisp, dark suit. He bowed deeply as Eleanor approached. "Everything is prepared for your return to the Manhattan residence, Madam Vance," Thomas said, taking her canvas utility bag from her shoulder. "Thank you, Thomas," Eleanor said, stepping into the cool, leather-scented interior of the car. She settled Leo onto the car seat beside her. As the Lincoln pulled down the long, gravel driveway, Eleanor looked back through the tinted window one last time. In the fading light of the Hamptons' sunset, the grand estate looked smaller, its perfect emerald lawn glowing under the automated lights. Through the glass facade of the terrace, she could see the distant, frantic silhouettes of Julian and Chloe, still screaming at each other in the empty, hollow mansion, completely trapped in the wreckage of their own vanity. 6 weeks later. The morning sun over Manhattan was crisp and bright, clearing away the early September fog. In a quiet, cobblestone pocket park in Greenwich Village, an elderly woman in a comfortable beige cardigan and sensible shoes sat on a green wooden bench. She was listening to a classical sonata through a pair of simple headphones, gently nodding her head to the rhythm. A few feet away, Leo was running through the grass, chasing a golden retriever puppy under the watchful eye of his mother, who was smiling warmly in the autumn breeze. Leo was clutching his brown stuffed bear, its soft fur clean and pristine. Eleanor took a sip of her coffee from a regular paper cup, enjoying the simple, uncurated warmth of the cardboard against her fingers. Her phone vibrated on the bench beside her. It was a brief, automated notification from Thomas. Xinhao Sterling Capital Holdings audit complete. Asset liquidation finalized. Julian Sterling has moved into a 2-bedroom rental in Astoria. Chloe Higgins has officially vacated her Manhattan apartment and returned to Pennsylvania. Her name has been permanently removed from all social register rosters on the Eastern Seaboard. The Hamptons estate has been donated to the City Children's Summer Trust Xinhao. Eleanor cleared the notification with a gentle swipe of her thumb. She slipped the phone back into her cardigan pocket and leaned back against the wooden bench, looking up at the sky. The sun was exactly the same sun that shone over the Hamptons, over Scranton, over the entire world. The only difference was, down here, among the ordinary people on the grass, nobody had to pay a premium to enjoy it.